What up? It's your boy T-Man Reaction. Today is Wrestling Reaction. About to take a little history lesson on what's going on this Saturday, which is none other than Royal Rumble. Now, I'm probably going to have to watch this a little bit later than it's aired because I'm working on my weekend job as well, too, though, as if I can sneak and watch a little bit. But other than that, though, we're going to take a look at the history of Royal Rumble from Wrestling Annie. You know, I've been watching some Wrestling Annie videos as of late. Had to jump ahead with this one since Royal Rumble this weekend. So, you know, Royal Rumble is one of the big four wrestling. I think it's like 89, 90 traditional 30-man battle royal, over the top battle royal as well too, was expanded to 30 men and 30 women battle royal over the top as well too, include some matches between them. So we're gonna look at the history of this Royal Rumble. Was probably gonna have some memorable moments of how it got started, some memorable highlights, some history making moments of Royal Rumble as well too, some history making highlights of Royal Rumble as well too. So without further ado, let's get it.
Long history, there have been a lot of great gimmick matches. We're talking about things which range from steel cage bouts to street fights and everything in between. That said, perhaps none have ever been as successful and as popular as the Royal Rumble. How did this famous 30-man battle royal get started, and what path has led it to the point it's at today? Well, that's exactly what we're going to be looking at right now in the entire history of the Royal Rumble. Of course, battle royals, matches which involve multiple people being in the ring eliminating one another until only one person remains, have long been a staple of pro wrestling. Hell, they've long been a staple of combat sports in general, with some of the earliest examples of these being found in 18th century England on the bare-knuckle boxing circuit.
Oh, wow.
So it should be no surprise then that this was a common trope to be found inside the squared circle during the territory days, with the idea that eliminations happened after someone was thrown over the top rope eventually becoming the standard agreed upon rule.
Why did the man try? Why Andre got to do a little man like that, though?
Everywhere. But it would be in the late 1980s that a new wrinkle was added to this format, which would go on to make it even better than before, as it was here that Pat Patterson pitched the Royal Rumble to his boss Vince McMahon. What was the Royal Rumble? Well, it was a battle royal with a few notable changes, the main one of which would be that rather than starting things out with everyone in the ring, entrants would come out at timed intervals, in the process adding an extra layer of excitement and strategy to the proceedings. Sadly, though, Vince McMahon was not initially convinced this would be a good idea, and that was why he agreed to give Pat the chance to try the new match type out, though only on the house show circuit. Yes, it would be on October 4th, 1987 that the first Royal Rumble match took place, with this one only featuring 12 entrants and ultimately being won by the one-man gang. Would it be a success at the time? Not really, no, even with the pre-match stipulation stating that the winner would get a shot at Hulk Hogan's world title on a future live event. And that then seemed to be the end of the whole thing, or at least it would have been had Pat Patterson not pushed hard for his boss to give the whole concept another try, as he believed it could still work.
In case not for with a one-man gang, had to be double check. That would be later on Akeem.
But that it had to be a televised event which could be seen by a larger audience, as the pomp and circumstance of the whole thing would help get it over better this way. Thankfully then, McMahon would agree that there was still something there with the Royal Rumble, and that it may in fact be a good way to expand WWF's Big Show calendar, something he was looking to do here after the success of the Survivor Series in 1987. So, deciding to roll the dice, he'd pencil it in as a USA Network special on January 24th, 1988, and would this time expand the field to a full 20 competitors. And that would prove to be the missing ingredient as it happened, because now with more people in the bout and the spectacle of it being on television giving it an added importance, this show would be a huge success for the company. Dick Ebersol, then head of the USA Network, was certainly a fan, with him going as far as to call it the greatest thing on television. So once things were over and Hacksaw Jim Duggan was standing tall as the winner, it was already clear this was a concept which was going to be repeated. Seriously, over the course of the rest of 1988, 2 more Royal Rumbles would take place on the house show circuit, with those being won by Jake the Snake Roberts and ravishing Rick Rude. That said, neither of those bouts were televised. No, for the next televised Rumble, we'd have to wait until January 15th, 1989, the night the match in many ways reached its final form. Why was this? Well, because it was here that the field of entrants would be further expanded to include 30 people, the number which would be the norm going forward. And it wasn't only that trope which started here, as this would also be the first Royal Rumble to appear on pay-per-view. Who won the bout this time around? Well, that would be Big John Studd. But by now, the Rumble was already being used to tell additional stories other than just who the victor was going to be. That's right, it was here that we saw the Mega Powers program get furthered when Hulk Hogan eliminated Randy Savage midway through the proceedings. And as the years went on, this would also become a staple of the Royal Rumble too. With there being so many different performers involved, it could advance a whole host of differing angles all over the course of a single hour. Still though, for as popular as it was by then, there was still a sense that the Rumble was more of an upper mid-card match, as while main eventers would be involved, none of them ever seemed to win it. Of course, this would change in 1990 though, as that was when, after coming face to face with the Ultimate Warrior for the first time right in the midst of the match, Hulk Hogan went on to reign victorious after eliminating 29 other men. And in the process, he'd firmly established the idea that this was a match which the tippy-top guy wanted to stand tall in too, something he only further proved by winning it all over again in 1991. But even then, bigger things were about to come for this match type, as it was in 1992 that it reached another level again, with arguably its greatest incarnation to date. What made the 1992 Royal Rumble so special? Well, it was the first time, outside of that initial house show version, where a concrete prize was up for grabs, as after the controversy surrounding Hulk Hogan and The Undertaker's trading back and forth of the WWF title the prior November, the belt had been vacated and was to be put on the line in the 30-man Battle Royal itself.
Oh, wow.
Yes, the man who won this Rumble would be able to call themselves world champion. And this meant that, more so than ever, every big name on the roster wanted to get involved. That said, the big story of this bout undoubtedly belonged to Ric Flair. After all, it was here that, after having only jumped ship from WCW a few months prior while still in possession of the big gold belt, the self-proclaimed real world's champion drew the short straw by entering at number 3, only for him to then go on and win the entire thing. Really, if you ever wanted to see a great Nature Boy performance, it's right here, as the whole match became the Ric Flair show. And after outlasting everyone and holding the winged eagle above his head, he was able to lord over everyone the fact that he really was the best. Honestly, more so than anything which came before it, this was the point the Royal Rumble fully felt like a very big deal. So much so that by the time the 1993 incarnation came around, a new rule would be added which stated that the winner going forward would get a guaranteed world title shot at WrestleMania just a few months later. Who would be the first person to get that world title shot? Well, that would be Yokozuna, the man who won the 93 Royal Rumble after entering at number 27
the way he
and last
eliminating
Randy
Savage.
And as it happened, he'd go on to WrestleMania 9 in April and would there nab the WWF title, or at least he would, for about 5 minutes before Hulk Hogan then won it from him. Obviously then, the 1994 Royal Rumble would have a lot to live up to, and that was why Vince McMahon decided to go for a unique ending here, in which both Bret Hart and Lex Luger eliminated each other at the same time, in the process creating a situation where, for the first and only time to date, there were dual winners of the match. Why had this been done? Well, because at that point the boss wasn't sure who he wanted to go with as his next ace. As time went on though, it became clear that Bret was that guy, especially after he went on to win the big one at WrestleMania 10. Sadly though, following on from this, the bout created by Pat Patterson almost a decade prior would hit a bit of a lull, as during the New Generation era, its importance started to wane. And the reason for that was, at least in part, because WWF's importance in general was starting to wane on account of business cratering following the steroid trial and its aftermath. So when Shawn Michaels won the match in both 1995 and 1996, becoming the second person to go back-to-back in the process, as well as the first man to win after entering at number 1 as he did during the former year, it never hit as hard as it should have. Hell, even the fact it was established here that both feet had to hit the floor in order for someone to be eliminated, a ruling which led to a very dramatic close to the latter year's event, did little to get the overall wrestling audience excited. And that would be the same in 1997 when, in one of the more creative closes to the Rumble ever, massively popular heel Stone Cold Steve Austin simply rolled back into the ring after he was eliminated, and the referee never saw it, with this allowing him to win in the most roguish of fashion possible. Something which only made him all the more popular with the late 90s audience. Of course, on account of this screwy victory, though, while the record books would state that the Rattlesnake was the winner, he would not get to go on to WrestleMania to challenge for the world title. No, we wouldn't get another example of that happening again until 1998, when Austin became the third person to go back-to-back.
Right.
And when he got his title shot at WrestleMania 14, he'd make sure to win this, as he finally coronated himself as the face of the then burgeoning Attitude Era. As you would expect then, at this point, the Royal Rumble felt like it had regained its importance once more. So much so, in fact, that even the mess which was the 1999 version of the bout, the one which pretty much revolved entirely around Steve Austin and Vince McMahon, and which was eventually won by the boss himself, wasn't enough to slow things down. Of course, that was still generally seen as being a bad Rumble. That said, things would bounce back again in 2000, as this was the year that, after a memorable mid-match dance break from Too Cool added some fun to the bout, much in the same way as Mick Foley appearing 3 times in each of his different incarnations had a couple of years prior, The Rock would stamp his ticket as the new face of WWF in the Rattlesnake's absence by entering at number 24 and last eliminating The Big Show, sort of. That's right, while the People's Champion would be the official winner here, as a result of a botch which saw his feet hit the ground first during the closing sequence, Paul White would also get a shot at the gold at the Showcase of the Immortals. In the end, however, neither of them would win during this show, as once WrestleMania 16 was over, Triple H would still be on top, with this marking the second time a Rumble winner had failed to win their follow-up title shot after Shawn Michaels had first done the same in 1995. Well, third, if we count that corporate Rumble which happened on Raw in 1999 and which was won by China, but we're inclined to not include unofficial or lesser versions of the match going forward for the purposes of this video, as there would be too many which occurred on house shows and episodes of weekly TV to get through. No, what we'll focus on instead is the 2001 match, another contender for Best Royal Rumble of all time, as this was the one where, with the likes of Steve Austin, The Rock, The Undertaker, Kane, and Rikishi all being involved, for the first time in a long time, it wasn't clear heading in who was going to win. Of course, in the end, it would be the Rattlesnake who came out the victor for a record third time, with this allowing him to go on to WrestleMania 17 and reign victorious. But that wasn't the only notable thing about the 2001 Royal Rumble, as this was also the one which in many ways marked the start of the surprise entrant, something which happened when a legend from the past appeared here in the form of the Honky Tonk Man. As the years went on, this would become another staple of the bout. Hell, it would be what led to Mr. Perfect reappearing in the 2002 version, the version which was ultimately won by Triple H. And it would also be what led to further names from the past coming back in 2003 and 2004, the years in which Brock Lesnar and Chris Benoit both reigned supreme. That said, a new wrinkle which had been added here had nothing to do with surprise entrants. What was this new wrinkle? Well, it would be a ruling which stated that, because the brand split meant there were now 2 world titles in the WWE ecosystem, the winner could choose to either challenge for the WWE title over on SmackDown, something Brock did in 2003, or the World Heavyweight title over on Raw, something Benoit did after he won the year after. However, the big Chris Benoit win, the one which saw him become the second man to enter at number 1 and outlast 29 other competitors, is not the one you're going to see celebrated today for obvious reasons. No, by now it's all but been erased from history. Instead, if you want to see a more focused upon Rumble, then you have to look to 2005, the year where a legitimate botch led to Dave Bautista and John Cena last eliminating each other. Obviously then, as this...
and then when McMahon tore his quad...
wasn't the plan the way it had been back in 1994, backstage personnel were left scrambling when it came to trying to fix the problem. And that led to Vince McMahon coming out to the ring in order to restart the match, though not before tearing both of his quads while trying to enter the ring. And all this was made even funnier by the fact that in the end, it didn't really matter that Batista eventually won the restarted bout. No, both he and Cena would go on to win the World Heavyweight and WWE titles respectively at WrestleMania 21 anyway. Sure, Big Dave scoring the victory during the 30-man Battle Royal did ensure he'd be main eventing the Showcase of the Immortals, as almost every other Rumble winner had before him. But even that wouldn't be a guarantee going forward, as when Rey Mysterio entered at number 2 in 2006 and then went on to win the whole thing in honor of Eddie Guerrero, someone who had passed away mere months prior, he'd get to snag the World Heavyweight title away from Kurt Angle at WrestleMania 22, but only in the middle of the show. Yes, we were now entering a period where the Royal Rumble was beginning to feel a little devalued again, as winning it did not necessarily mean you'd be going on last at the grandest stage of them all. And this was made fully clear for all to see when, after The Undertaker won in 2007, in the process becoming the first man to do so after entering at number 30, and after John Cena reigned victorious in 2008 after making a surprise early return from injury, also at number 30, neither would main event WrestleManias 23 or 24 respectively. Hell, in the case of Big Match John, he'd actually use his guaranteed title shot a month prior at No Way Out.
Oh, yeah.
Thankfully then, by the time the 2009 incarnation of the bout came around, things would be back to the way they had been before, for a little while at least, because it was here that once Randy Orton outlasted all the other entrants, he'd go on to WrestleMania 25 to challenge Triple H for the WWE title in the closer of the evening. Sure, he would ultimately fail to win this one, but at least the chance to close out the biggest show of the year had been afforded to him, something which could not be said for Edge after he won the Rumble in 2010. And that wasn't the only perception problem the match created by Pat Patterson all those years prior was starting to face as the 2010s began. No, 2011 and 2012 would prove to be particularly weak years for the bout, as rather than it being won by people who fans accepted as full-blown main event guys, these years were won by Alberto Del Rio and Sheamus, respectively, two performers who, despite being pushed hard, were not seen as being worthy winners by a large section of the audience. And the negative reception around their wins was only made worse by the fact that rather than go on to main event WrestleMania, each would end up curtain jerking the show, all while challenging for the increasingly irrelevant World Heavyweight title. Then when you add on to this the fact that the 2011 Rumble had felt particularly bloated after the field had been expanded to 40 entrants, it was clear things were hitting a low point for the concept. And while 2013 would see things get back to some sense of that old prestige and fun, not just because John Cena became a two-time winner here, but because it also would be around then that Kofi Kingston started his annual survival spot where he managed to avoid both feet hitting the floor in increasingly outrageous ways.
Hopefully Javon does that this year.
Come 2014, arguably the lowest point in the Royal Rumble's history would arrive. What was that moment?
Bautista.
Well, right in the midst of the Yes movement, Vince McMahon would choose not to even put Daniel Bryan in the match, with him instead going with returning star of the Ruthless Aggression era, Dave Bautista, as the winner. And such an unpopular move would this be with the audience, it would lead to them turning on the match itself. Still, at least it couldn't get any worse, right? Wrong. Because the very next year, the exact same thing would happen when the American Dragon was once more pushed aside in favor of the new chosen one of the promotion, Roman Reigns, with this creating an even more volatile moment.
David was ruthless in Philly, for real.
As fan morale seemed to be at an all-time low. Really then, come 2016, after back-to-back failures, WWE were in desperate need of a Royal Rumble match which was going to hit. And while they would get this, with the 1992 gimmick of the world title being put on the line and the bout itself being used here, it still wouldn't be a complete hit. No, even if Roman Reigns didn't come out the winner here, and so, as a result, left without the top prize, it was very clear that when Triple H came out at number 30 and reigned victorious ahead of the far more popular option, Dean Ambrose, things were just being set up for the big dog to get the belt back at WrestleMania a few months later, something he ultimately did. Hell, even 2017 would only see minimal improvements in the match's fortunes, as after Randy Orton won that year's version of the bout, it continued to feel like things were treading water a little. So if we want a true revival in fortunes for the 30-man Battle Royal then, we have to move over to 2018, as this was the year that for the first time ever, the titular pay-per-view had two Rumbles, one for the men and one for the women. And in the first ever ladies version of the contest, it would be Asuka who came out on top, with this ultimately serving as the prelude for Ronda Rousey debuting in WWE. Over on the men's side, meanwhile, it would be a clean sweep for Japan, as Shinsuke Nakamura would outlast 29 other combatants in order to book his ticket.
Unfortunately, neither wanted the pay-per-view.
Get to AJ Styles and the WWE title at WrestleMania 34. Yes, with two fresh main event level stars winning here, it finally felt like the Royal Rumble had turned a corner. And that momentum would continue into 2019 as well, as this was the year that, with there once more being men's and women's versions of the match, something which would become the norm going forward, the guys' one saw Seth Rollins return to the top spot after a boost in fan support during the prior months.
Yes, sir.
All while the ladies saw a new ace rise to the forefront when the most over person in the whole industry at this point, Becky Lynch, booked her ticket to the first ever women's WrestleMania main event a few months later. Of course, there is one Rumble match we've skipped over here, which does bear mentioning,
the greatest
however,
Royal Rumble.
one which didn't happen at the titular pay-per-view. That's right. Well, we did say we wouldn't be covering all the house shows and TV mini Rumbles which took place over the years. This one stands out a little bit more than those, as it was billed as the greatest Royal Rumble. What happened here? Well, in a 50-man battle royal, which took place when WWE ventured over to Saudi Arabia for the first of their decades worth of shows there, pretty much all of the top stars of the promotion battled it out to see who would win the ceremonial Greatest Royal Rumble trophy and championship belt. Who won this one? Well, after names like Daniel Bryan, Rey Mysterio, Randy Orton, Kevin Owens, and Chris Jericho were all eliminated, it would be Braun Strowman who was still left in the ring, with this officially making him the holder of the belt, which he still technically holds to this day, 7.5 years later. Of course, this is not an event which has ever been done a second time as of this video's recording, though. So if we want to keep going forward with the history of the Royal Rumble, we have to look to 2020, the year where Charlotte Flair won the women's version, and in one of the better booked versions of the men's equivalent in years, which also saw the return of Edge to the ring after 9 years away, it was Drew McIntyre who came out on top once all was said and done. Little did we know at the time, though, these matches would take place mere months before the world went into lockdown. And so because of that, when WrestleMania came around and Charlotte and Drew were challenging Rhea Ripley and Brock Lesnar respectively, their big wins would happen in front of an empty warehouse in Florida rather than in front of tens of thousands of fans. Still, at least there was a new wrinkle established with this year's show, as in choosing to challenge the then NXT Women's Champion, Charlotte Flair made it so that option could be a viable one from here on in. Sadly, though, while this remained an option in 2021, the fact that lockdown was still in effect meant that the show would also take place in front of no crowd, only the giant Zoom call that was the Thunderdome. And so as a result, while Bianca Belair last eliminating Rhea Ripley to win a pretty good women's Rumble was fun to see, and while Edge turning back the clock to reign victorious in the men's bout was certainly emotional, it didn't hit quite as hard as it might have done otherwise. No, the real energy of this match type wouldn't return in full until 2022, to the point audiences were allowed to attend shows again. And as it happened, that would be the year 2 UFC stars came out on top in the men's and women's bouts, with these stars being Brock Lesnar and Ronda Rousey. Yes, at least on the men's side, it was a return to the same old again. That said, while we didn't know it at the time, change was in the air. Because by the time the 2023 edition of the show arrived, Vince McMahon would no longer be the one fully booking the show, and that meant two fresh faces would get to rise to the forefront here when, in the ladies' contest, Rhea Ripley finally ascended to the top of the card, all while in the guys' equivalent, Cody Rhodes took the next step in the journey towards finishing his story by outlasting 29 other combatants. Of course, while this seemed to be setting up Rhodes beating Roman Reigns for the undisputed title at WrestleMania 39, as we all know now, that would not be how things played out. Noah's recently uncovered documents have confirmed any original plans for the American Nightmare to reign victorious after round 1 were scrapped when Roman Reigns and Paul Heyman successfully lobbied Vince McMahon to change things up. And this meant Cody would have to win for a second year in a row if he wanted to get another shot at the gold at WrestleMania 40, with this being something he ultimately did in 2024, making him only the 4th man to ever win back-to-back Rumbles after Hulk Hogan, Shawn Michaels, and Steve Austin. Who would win the Women's Royal Rumble in 2024? Well, that would be none other than Bayley, with this allowing her to also get a world title shot at the Showcase of the Immortals a few months later, a shot she too would end up winning. By the time 2025 came around, however, it would be neither of these people who won their respective matches. No, instead, 2025 would see Charlotte Flair win the women's version for the second time, all while Jey Uso was pulling off a major upset in the men's equivalent. So because of that then, in the 2026 Royal Rumble, it could be anyone who comes out on top. Of course, we'll have to wait and see what the results of those contests are because, as of the time of this video's recording, they've yet to happen. One thing is for sure, however, whether Cody Rhodes is able to win for a 3rd time in the men's match and tie the record currently held by Stone Cold Steve Austin, Someone new like Roxanne Perez is able to reign victorious in the women's version, or returning stars such as Chris Jericho are able to come back and shake things up, the Royal Rumble will always remain one of the key parts of the WWE calendar. To some fans, a part which is even more important than wrestling.
Yep, and there you have it though. So yeah, who y'all think gonna win this year's Royal Rumble? So other than that though, if you like my reaction, like, share, subscribe to your channel. It's your boy T-Bird signing off. One love.